Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lessons Learned or Lessons Applied, Closing the Loop with Visible Thread. I'm Kyle Peterson. I lead our account strategy and customer success team here at Visible Thread. And if you've been to our webinars before, you've probably seen me. So first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. This is a huge virtual event for us. So if you've been attending other events today, thank you. Hope this is just as good. If it's your first one, welcome. We're really glad to have you. So a couple of bits of housekeeping, and then we'll dive right in. So first of all, at the end of this session, we'll be releasing a survey. So if you have feedback, if you like what you saw, we would certainly appreciate that feedback. If there's certain topics, certain formats you'd like to see more of, let us know. More demos, more panel discussions. We really do value that feedback and are always working on making these virtual events as good as they can be every single time. Throughout the session, you have access to a Q&A box and a chat box. Feel free to use one or both of those to submit questions. I will get through as many questions as I can. I'll stop maybe periodically at natural points, but I'll get through most of them at the end, but I will be monitoring that as we go along. Certainly welcome your questions. So maybe last thing, and we'll dive in. You will receive access to these slides and to the recordings. And if you have peers that registered but just couldn't attend, something came up, they'll receive that as well. So do know that. Let's do it. So lessons learned, this is in the context of bid proposals. Maybe we have a winning or generally more likely a losing bid, and really doing a deep dive. What went well? What could we have improved upon? What kinds of evaluator feedback are we receiving? But most importantly, when we receive that information, what do we do with it? How do we make sure that it's accessible for the future, that we work it in to our bids moving forward? Is it shareable? What constitutes a good lesson? Where do they live? There's a lot of questions here to take it forward. I think doing this action isn't necessarily terribly complicated. It's solidifying it and utilizing those outputs into the future where there can be a little bit of challenge. So what I'll do is I'll outline a couple of general challenges, some recommendations. What should you be looking at when you're conducting a deep dive? But I'll spend the bulk of the session actually using Visible Thread to attack some of these challenges. So I'd say some of these challenges you might be well aware of, you don't experience them, but there should be a kind of a wide enough list. Hopefully there's something new there for people in the room. So, right off the bat, like I said, for some organizations this might seem obvious, but I know it's not done universally. If you do lose a bid, do you ask for a debrief? Do you attend? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? So just always asking, review your RFP requirements in advance. What do those debrief rights and formats look like? Can you alter those in the Q&A period? All good things to be thinking about. And then if you have that debrief, and let's say it's over the phone, I would request a quick summary in writing as well if you can. If the customer doesn't really want to do that, then I would anoint a note taker to take really good copious notes to have that documentation that you can save it and bring forward into either this debrief or future lessons learned when you're dealing with that same customer, for instance. Documentation. We can have great conversations with our evaluators. We can have great post-mortems done by BD capture and proposals, but do we get those lessons down into a findable, searchable, shareable piece of content? Where does it live? So right off the bat, I recommend creating a standardized lessons learned template. What questions are we asking our evaluators? What questions are we asking our internal bid teams? Maybe you break it down by timeline. What could we have done differently at pink team, red team, gold team, etc. But having just a standardized breakdown helps lessen that learning curve and making sure that we're doing this, because lessons learned aren't always done. Kind of smoothing that out. This is what we need every time. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Make sure that busy people give this the time that it deserves. And then also, where do those lessons live once they're jotted down? So whether you use a SharePoint or any other kind of document management solution, or even a local drive, well-structured, findable, consistent folder structures really goes a long way. We don't want these things living kind of all over the place by bid, by proposal manager. Find a centralized repository for it, and then make sure that everyone that needs access access to those in the future has said access. I think people look at proposals during lessons learned. They probably look at their RFPs as well, and they know their RFPs. How often do you bump them up alongside one another? I'll dive into this one using VT Docs in just a moment, but literally looking at alignment between the RFP exhibits and your proposal exhibits is a great way to start that post-mortem and get into some of those lessons learned. You know, the poor knowledge sharing. My bid team that conducts the lessons learned might have gotten a lot out of it, but if you work in a larger organization or you have dispersed teams, are they able to access that good work too? Or are we a little too siloed? And so we don't really evangelize and universalize some of those lessons. That goes back to those searchable, findable databases. Have a think about that. Generally, that you'd want to bring IT into those discussions as well. Looking forward, we've got all these great lessons, they're findable. How do we actually work them into the process, into the future, into the bids to make sure that we don't repeat these mistakes? I'm going to talk a lot about our VT Writer product here in terms of customized watchword lists, custom and repeatable prompts that your writers can use if you're using an AI writing type solution to enhance your writing, not to replace, to be clear. I think there's a lot you can do there in terms of teeing up your LLM, your large language model, to incorporate some of those lessons. And then just in general, when you're actually hosting that lessons learned session, vent away. I'm a big fan of venting, in the right doses, but, making sure that there's really a nice breakdown. What do we expect to get out of the session? What makes a true lesson? What do we share versus what's just kind of a problem, an observation, or a complaint? The other thing I would recommend is find an unbiased party to actually lead that conversation. Maybe it's someone from another bid team that didn't participate in this one. Something just to think about there. So let's dive into kind of this post-mortem in terms of we've lost a bid. I want to bump it up against my RFP. And then I also want to do a little bit of competitive intel. So I'm going to be going through a couple of examples here in both Docs and Writer. One of the examples you'll see is looking at competitor responses. I know not everyone has that luxury, but if you're in a space where you can access redacted responses, maybe through FOIA requests, great place to really learn a lot of those competitive intels and use LLMs to help you with that analysis. So we'll do that, and then I'll kind of leave you with a couple of best practices, but I definitely want to get into the software now. So I will be sharing my screen, and in just a moment, we should be seeing VT Docs. So for those who aren't aware, Visible Thread, we have two core products, VT Docs and VT Writer. I'll be showing you both today to attack this. Both products can help us when we're conducting this type of analysis. So within VT Docs here, in this folder, I have an RFP that I responded to, and this is my hypothetical response. And so we literally have the RFP and the response lined up side by side. And now what Discovery is doing is it's highlighting these themes automatically for you. You don't need to tell Visible Thread, show me services, show me care. And this is a healthcare example, just to be clear. The other reason I'm doing this is we have some really exciting product updates to Discovery that are just about to drop. So you're actually seeing kind of a demo development environment. So congratulations, you're in rarefied company here. So what this is telling us is, hey, Kyle, across the theme of services, my RFP is really nailing it, 743 times total. My response mentions services in some type of variation 16 times. But when we expand these themes, we see every variation of the idea. And then at that granular level, does it appear in one or both documents? And so in this case, we can see, emergency services was mentioned in the RFP. It wasn't mentioned in my response. Medicaid services mentioned in the RFP, not mentioned in my response. And when I select these themes, I'm seeing over here to the right where and how those themes are being used. So we want to do less sifting, less scrolling, less control finding. Now, when we're mentioning gaps, alignment, what's my RFP speaking to? What's my response speaking to? This is what I want to draw the group's attention to, is this filter icon. This will be released shortly. Now we can start to do some of this filtering and searching automatically. You know, visible thread, show me gaps where things appear in one document but not in the other. Where is their full alignment? The RFP mentions it, I mention it. Where's their partial? And then where's their unique? So that's saying it's only appearing in one or the other. So services, for instance, you know, covered services is appearing. We don't see that in the response. So lots of ways to slice and dice this while also, you know, filtering directly. You know these bids, you know these RFPs. You know, you could say, you know what, show me things speaking to innovative, innovation. Where do we speak to that? Where don't we? And in this case, we see our customer, you know, mentioning innovative payment methods. We're mentioning innovative and best practices. Possibly a bit of a miss there. We're close, but no cigar. And so we can run this filtering on multiple themes all at once, and we can kind of mine some of this content and share it with the group. So kind of taking this a step further, if you are looking at past responses or, like I mentioned earlier, kind of competitive responses, discovery is a great way to start to identify some of these, you know, unique references. What are my competitors mentioning that I'm not and the others are not? You know, so Kaiser is mentioning care pods. Humana is mentioning integrated care. Nobody else is using those themes. You know, culturally appropriate care. That's an interesting qualifier. And so we can select these themes, learn more, and then we can export or shred this, share with the team, drop it into those repositories, or use it to tee up some of those lesson learned kind of sessions. But this is where we're getting into shareable, findable content. Let's get this report out of Visible Thread so I can drop it into a SharePoint, for instance. And so here we're seeing, you know, just show me where integrated care is appearing for Humana. And this is important for these, you know, big bad Medicaid opportunities. How is Kaiser talking about culturally appropriate care, care pod staff, so on and so forth? Now, let's say that, and this is actually a real example from a user group that I work with. You know, they're really focused on maternity type requirements and deliverables, and they know that they can beef up their responses on that theme. Great kind of opportunity to use this filter. Show me anything that pertains to maternal, and we can see, you know, other competitors aren't really speaking to it. Grayed out means maternal doesn't appear in those documents at all. Peachtree seems to really be nailing it in every variation. So we can use this to mine our own content or competitors' content and work it in to future bids. And so once we have these themes, these win themes, these discriminators, these lessons learned identified and solidified, and we want to take them forward into future bids, this is where this dictionary search view can become quite powerful, where instead of saying, show me every single theme visible thread and I'll filter kind of down to my heart's content, I know that within maternal health, I want to focus on ideas like high risk, predictive modeling, innovation, predictive analytics. I want to work these into responses. You can assign this dictionary to a proposal volume or volumes, and we can make sure that we're touching on these ideas. Once again, anything in gray is not appearing. So you can bring this to your color team reviews in the future. And you can also use this against competitive content as well. You know, predictive analytics, Kaiser and Peach State are speaking to it. The other three are not. I might beef that up. We see a lot of alignment on high risk type terminology. So this is more of a kind of directed search, and you can continue to shred and export this to your heart's content. Now I want to jump into VT docs. So there's actually a couple of examples I'm going to share here. So this is a real story from a user group that I work with, and they received feedback on a losing bid that they were far too often using the word assume. We assume, it is assumed, contractor assumes, so on and so forth. But they were just weaving this kind of non-committal assumption type language into their response. And so while that might be kind of contractually sometimes intelligent to kind of mitigate risk, the evaluator, it kind of led them to lose trust. Can we actually trust these guys to deliver if everything is receiving this qualifier? So anyway, so that was the response they got. You guys used assuming language way too often. So that's a pretty straightforward lesson learned. But how do we make sure that in future bids, we identify overuse of this terminology outside of just control finding our way through a response, making sure our writers just do it, making sure our reviewers look for it? So enter VT writer and enter this concept of a watchword. So, and this is just a snippet of a response, just for the ease of demoing here. But I've programmed VT writer to look for assumed, assumes, we assume, so on and so forth, and we'll flag it everywhere that we see it. You can include guidance. So this could be some of that lesson learned information. Why do we want to reduce the use of assumptive language? Here's why. It makes the customer doubt our ability to perform. We recognize exceptions though. We don't have to remove every single instance, but we're empowering the writer or the reviewer to identify it, potentially delete it, or you can also propose alternatives. Maybe we prefer the word expected. I select that and it was replaced automatically right within the content. So watchwords, really kind of quick, easy, simple example. Very quick to put together. Show me every single instance, provide alternatives, and I can then take action. So watchwords, great way to do it, whether it's assumes, whether it's, in Medicaid instances, generally you're not speaking to patients or enrollees, you're speaking to members, capital M members. So you could program watchword lists to look for lowercase member or provider or enrollee, patient, etc. So let's see kind of what that list looks like, and then we'll go through a few other examples. So you're deploying that list within Microsoft Word to be clear, but within the VT Writer kind of app environment, that's where I can program those watchword lists. So I have all kinds of cool categories here, where here is that assumption, find assumed, find assume, find it is assumed. I can program approved alternatives. I can even explain what we're trying to do here. Words like as may be required, a little too soft. That can lead to scope creep, things like that. Even things like company name, visible thread's a great example. When we respond, we're not visible space thread. We are visible no space thread, capital V, capital T. So those are those approved alternatives. That's very common with larger organizations where you have, many different subsidiaries. Is it Lockheed Martin? Is it Lockheed? Is it Lockheed Martin Corp? Lockheed Martin Corporation? Even something as simple as that, you can program into your watchword list. So all kinds of options here. These are pretty quick to put together. And then, my customer success team, if there's any users in the room, we can help you kind of generate these. Wall of truth type terminology you can bake into these watchword lists to deploy against all your content, whether you're writing it from scratch or reviewing existing content and maybe just tweaking it. All right. Now, and that's not AI, just to be clear. That is just natural language processing. That's finding with 100% accuracy. This is where we're seeing these words. Let's now bring in a large language model, LLMs, generative AI, all that fun stuff that we're hearing so much about. You can customize prompts based on lessons learned. So that's what I've done here. We got dinged for non-committal language overusing the word assume. So what I'm doing is I'm just highlighting this text. Imagine you're deep in the middle of a proposal cycle, and there's a portion of the document that I want to really reduce the use of that kind of non-committal, squishy, it is assumed type language. I've selected it, and the prompt is already written for me. Review this text and reduce the use of assumptive language to the greatest extent possible. I want to avoid the use of phrases like we assume, it is assumed, contractor assumes, etc. Rewrite those types of phrases in a more active tone. And so now the LLM will go to work, and it's going to rephrase this, rewrite it based on kind of my prompt here. We must complete all necessary activities. Maybe I want to really kind of zero in on selection based, and then here I'm just going to run that again. Yeah, this is better. So now we're seeing, we're taking full responsibility. That's pretty unambiguous. We're not assuming anything, Additional personnel may be required. However, this is currently uncertain, will need to be reassessed. It's still not, locking you in, but it's less assuming proposals are scored, not always written. We can reduce that while still bounding ourselves. And there we go. Here it's rewritten for us, and we can continue to slice and dice it. So, bottom line, use large language models to help with this writing, but you can use these prompts to incorporate that type of lesson. We want to reduce this type of language. We know that. And now I don't even need to type in the prompt. I just need to select the text that I want to rescore, rephrase, etc. Great way to do it. So now if I go to just kind of a blank sheet of paper here, let's talk about expanding upon certain win themes that maybe we identified, certain lessons. We know next time we need to focus more on those maternal health offerings. So, you can use LLMs to do that. So if I just click that prompt, let me actually make that a little more clear here. Here we go. So we're going back after a Georgia Medicaid bid in this case. And we know that we really want to hammer home health-related social needs. And we want to deliver outcome trackings and social care delivery models. We need to beef up our response there. Ensure the response focuses on how our approach is differentiated and metrics driven. So now we're back into kind of more of a writing mode here. I'm going to use files. And so this is where we can actually use existing content to do this, within your SharePoint site. So I'm going to use this response here, and I'm going to click continue. And so this prompt is using existing content, acceptable content. It's your own content. It's not exposed to the outside world either, just to be clear. It's maintained within your own environment. And most importantly, it's using that content to generate a more contextualized response. So as this finishes, we're seeing these footnote kind of numbers coming out. And that's VT Writer saying, hey, Kyle, this is where I found that content. I didn't just conjure it out of thin air. So how do we know we track referrals through a closed group referral system? If we click on that, this section of the content is speaking to that idea. And there we see that find help solution that's doing that screening in that closed loop. So if we're happy with this response, we can insert it. And you can do this to a blank sheet of paper, or you could do it right in the middle of a response. So the point is, if we know that we want to expand upon these health-related social needs, and we know we want to focus on predictive modeling, metrics-driven approaches, and measurable outcomes, your teams can work those ideas and those lessons into customized prompts for your users. They don't have to prompt every single time. They just need to point it at, maybe we have a winning proposal that we want to use as our model. Maybe we have a losing proposal, but it still just does a great job of speaking to this. All they have to do is pick that content. The prompt is done for them. Now, one other thing I just want to highlight. These prompts, they're not set in stone. You can customize them, and this is a free-form text field. You can tweak that as required because, every opportunity is different, to be clear. But if you have similar customers, similar products, similar types of contracts, it's a great way to get started. So there is one other example that I want to highlight here, and I'm actually going to open up a new document. The other thing that I want to highlight is, using an LLM to conduct that post-mortem as well, whether it's on your own content, if you have access to competitor proposals. LLMs are great ways to synthesize kind of key ideas from one or more documents. So we're returning to this idea of maternal health. We know we want to beef up our responses, our ability to speak to that customer need. And so you can once again customize these prompts to focus on those win themes, those differentiators, those discriminators. But in this case, I want to use this idea and look at competitive content and see how others are speaking to this. So I've customized this prompt. I'm a director at a health maintenance organization. I'm conducting competitive analysis of my competitors' maternal health solutions, offerings, and approaches. Please summarize how, and this is where you can customize this. So I'm going to say Humana in this case, specifically delivers, and then here you can insert, one or more subtopics that you're interested in learning more about as it pertains to maternal health. So in this case, I know that addiction, the state of Georgia cares about addiction support and innovative strategies, right? How are you different than the rest of the pack? Constantly improving. And then, how do I want that output to look? Use a combination of bullet points, narrative explanation to allow rapid understanding of their approach and differentiators. And now, once again, I use files. You can browse, you can go to SharePoint. These collections that you see me kind of tapping into, that's content that I'm constantly using. So I don't always have to go back and select it. That's a nice quality of life feature. So now we're using this Humana response, and we're going to use the LLM to very quickly synthesize how are they speaking to maternal health, addiction support, and innovative strategies. How are they differentiating their offerings? So same idea, but we're using the response itself to drive this analysis, and then we're still receiving those footnotes, cite your sources, where in the content is it speaking to this. This type of analysis is a great thing to bring to lessons learned. And use it on your own proposal too. How did we speak to X, Y, and Z? How well did we differentiate it? All that good stuff. So this is very flexible. The only variable is what content you're pointing it at. And so if I insert, I very quickly get a nice breakdown of how Humana is offering these services. And it's nice and well structured like I told it to be. I want section headings, I want bullet points. And I'm learning a lot today. Residential treatment, they prioritize referrals, high quality outcomes, ASAM guidelines, good to know. Maybe we need to speak more about AS AM guidelines. All good stuff. So we definitely want to read it. We want to tweak it, but this is a great way to get started and to take some of these lessons from existing content. So before I take some questions, I do just want to highlight, cool prompts, Kyle. How do we get those into VT Writer? So I'm back into my app version. Instead of the watchword list, I can have an entire list of AI prompts. So here, within my lessons learned category, I have a variety of different prompts. So, focusing on outcomes rather than levels of effort. And we see anything in purple or lilac, that's customizable. There's that reduced use of non-committal language. Expand upon this win theme. And then I'll just quickly create one just to show you how quickly you can do it. And I'm going to do, we'll do some competitive analysis here. That's kind of my rough. That's just what you point the mouse to. That should kind of alert you to what you're doing. And then here in the prompt, this is where you're actually writing the prompt. And so this is what users don't have to do every single time now. And so that's where, I can say I am a capture manager, and we'll just say aerospace industry, conducting competitive analysis for a lessons learned exercise. And then brackets is how you get the lilac, how insert competitor delivers. And then this is where, once again, you can dictate what it is you're interested in. So this would be, discriminators, or deliverables for, and you can insert, certain business lines, but I'll just say aircraft manufacturing. Make this output well structured using bullet points, separate sections, etc. And now this prompt will be available for every user that I work with. They don't have to type in a perfect prompt every time. All they have to tweak is the purple section. But just remember, even if you're in Word and you want to, this is also free form here. So you can do anything, expand upon social services coordination. So you can do both. You can have these kind of pre-packaged prompts, or if there's enterprising users or people that just want to go do their own thing and improvise, you can certainly do so here as well. So lots of options. Okay, so let me stop sharing. I'll take some questions. Hopefully that's a pretty good breakdown. There's a lot of different ways we can take this, and a lot of different ways you can utilize this solution. So hoping that I've touched on a few hot buttons here. Let's see. Okay, is this LLM inside VT or is it outside? Or is it an outside LLM that interfaces with the tool? Michael, really good question. So the VT Writer product is LLM agnostic. So we certainly have our recommended LLMs, but you or your organization, if you have a preferred LLM, if you have one that you're building in-house, you can actually put that into the product. So kind of the simple analogy I would use is VT Writer is the car, the LLM is the engine. We can drop LLMs into the VT Writer based on your preference. Now, I want to expand upon something I said earlier, but I think it's relevant to this question. Is the LLM, then we very quickly get into security and privacy concerns as well. So the way VT can deploy is even with this LLM of your choice fitting into VT Writer, if security and privacy is a concern, that will be a kind of baked LLM that would be deployed behind your firewall within your environment with no connection to the broader internet. So that would give you that peace of mind to know that that LLM is not training on your content and it's not influencing content that other people out there are getting as well. So hoping that answers the question. It's an excellent one. And then Michael, on our website, there's a section, and I'm just going to make a note. I can send you an email after this. I can send you kind of an FAQ, a bit more detail on the LLM structure. Which ones do we recommend? How does it fit in? How does it connect or not, kind of security-wise? I'll just make sure to note that. Perfect. Okay. What is the pricing for this products? Happy to follow up with an email after that. At a really high level, both VT Docs and VT Writer, they're license-based subscriptions. So there, you know, if you have one user, there's a one user cost to that. If you have 100 users, you're paying by the user. And there's a couple of other kind of fees to be aware of, but at its base level, it's a seat-based model. It is not a usage-based model. And that's actually, I think, a really important point to note. We don't want to punish people really heavily utilizing or using this solution. So you pay for 1 or more seats for 12 or more months. And then that subscription would be up for renewal, but it's not usage-based. It's I, Kyle Peterson, have a license, and I have as much access to all that you saw as much as I can take. Good question. Dana, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. If I'm a one-person RFP response team, why would I need these tools? Yeah, good question. I'm sure in your mind, you know, the lessons learned are all in your head. So I'd say in terms of evangelizing those lessons to a broader team, yeah, it wouldn't be quite as relevant for a one-person writing and bid and proposal team. Where I think this would be a force multiplier is on that actual generative, you know, writing, help me write, draft me this, refine this. So you're doing this writing, you want to connect it to the RFP, and especially if you're, you know, a one-person team. I'm sure you're busier than most. Some of those solutions can just speed up what you're already doing. And there's other features that I didn't really show today, but there's other things that would benefit one-person teams as well. We have acronym reports. I have a 50-page proposal. Am I being consistent in my use of acronyms? We can identify all those issues for you right away, where in that case, you probably don't have an editor to help you do that. You might not have a tech writer to help you do that. So I think there's a lot of force multiplication kind of value here just to consider. And just to be clear too, we work with small one-person teams all the way up to, you know, major large enterprises. So we don't discriminate there. Good question. Actually, that was the Q&A box. So thank you. Keep the Q&A coming. I'm going to double check the chat. Yes, we can make the LLM FAQ available. I actually might, if I can figure it out, I might drop the link into the chat. That might be the easiest way to do it. So just while I do that, keep the questions coming. They're good ones. Thank you. So our help center, I'll send you 2 links. So in the chat, that first link is our overall help center. That contains deployment instructions, FAQs, guidance on basically all the backend stuff for both VT Docs and VT Writer. Now, in terms of VT Writer itself and the LLM, I am going to send that as well. And here is the actual kind of FAQ type link as well. So those are in the chat. If that doesn't work, give me a shout, but that should hopefully be the most efficient way to do this. Very good. Okay. And then what API does VT Writer use? That's an excellent technical question that those Help Center links I sent can answer. I do know that what you saw there in Microsoft Word, that's an actual approved Microsoft Word add-in. So that VT Writer kind of screen that I saw, you're accessing it right within Microsoft Word. So you get all the benefits of Microsoft Word, writing, editing, track changes, all that good stuff, where VT Writer is just there as an assistant alongside you as an add-in. If there's any more kind of technical questions on that, I'll refer it to some more techie guys than me, but really excellent question. Cool. So if there's nothing else, I will let the group get back to their busy days. A couple of follow-up kind of finishing items. You will, or actually let me go through these key takeaways, forgive me. So, when you have these lessons learned identified and memorialized in a Word doc, PDF doc, PowerPoint, what have you, make sure they're well labeled, they're easily found. Are they in a common SharePoint site that our writers, our B&P kind of colleagues have access to? We want to make sure that we're not commingling, winning, or I'd say good or bad content, especially if you're pointing LLMs at SharePoint folders. We don't want to be pointing at losers. We want to be pointing at winners or approved losers. Just do keep that in mind. Structure those folders by product, by customer, all that good stuff. And then also include non-proposal content, debrief notes, white paper responses, trip reports from BD, all excellent fodder for lessons learned, for crafting responses, differentiators, etc. And then whether you're using Visible Thread or anything else, if you have the ability to prompt LLMs, the best way to incorporate lessons learned into future writing is to tee up those prompts to incorporate some of those lessons and some of those ideas and themes you really want to hammer home on. So we don't have to rely on people remembering to do that, and we don't have to rely on them having to customize the perfect prompt every single time. And then using those watchword lists. We don't want to use the word assume. I'm looking for assume every time me or somebody else uses it. And then, objective scoring solutions is a great way to do it. How complex is the content? Do we see long sentences? All that good stuff. So I believe there's one more session after this, which would very much encourage people to get into. So kind of through Q&A. So if you have time, check out Rachel's session on from reactive proposals to proactive strategy. That's taking place in just 15 minutes. So do be aware of that next session. And then, like I mentioned earlier, after this, you will receive a survey. Would really love to hear your feedback. So do take just a minute or two and fill that out if you're so inclined. We really do appreciate it. And we work that in to future sessions. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks all.